The alien station floated in the darkness of space, its metal walls glowing with sick green lights, its halls filled with noise, shouts, and the smell of oil and blood. The place was known as the Market of Chains, where warlords, raiders, and pirates came to sell their prizes. Some sold weapons, some sold technology, and some sold lives. Humans were rare here, but not unknown. The protagonist, a tall man with a weathered face and calm eyes, walked slowly through the crowd. His jacket was simple, his boots dusty, but his steps were steady. He looked like a trader, someone who came to buy or sell small things. But inside he felt restless. He hated this place. He hated the way the aliens laughed when they spoke about slaves. The crowd suddenly grew louder. A new prize was being brought to the stage. Guards in black armor pulled forward a young girl, her wrists bound by glowing chains. Her skin shimmered faintly in the strange light. Not quite human, not quite alien. She was beautiful in a way that made everyone stop and stare. Her long, dark hair fell across her shoulders. Her face, pale and tired, yet her eyes burned with something different. The announcer shouted in 3 languages, telling the crowd that she was rare. She was not just a slave, but a treasure, a living jewel. The aliens leaned forward, greedy and excited. Some laughed, some shouted numbers, already starting to bid for her. The human did not move, his eyes locked on hers. For a moment the noise of the crowd vanished. He saw only her. Her lips trembled, and then, against all reason, she whispered. Her voice carried, across the short distance. Soft but clear. "Take me home," she said. The human froze. He was certain no one else heard it. The guards pulled her chains tighter, but she did not look at them. She looked at him, only him, as if she had been waiting. His mind raced. He had no plan, no reason to interfere. He had come to this place only for small trade, but her words struck him deeper than any weapon. Why would she say that? She did not know him. She could not know where he came from, and yet when their eyes met, it felt as if she recognized something inside him. He stepped back into the crowd, trying to hide his reaction. Around him, aliens argued loudly, raising the bids. The announcer laughed, promising the girl would serve any master well, that her beauty alone was worth the fortune. But the human knew. This was not beauty to be owned. This was not a prize. This was a person who begged for freedom. As he moved with the crowd, he could not stop thinking of her whisper, "Take me home." The words echoed in his mind again and again. Was it a plea for rescue, or something else? The guards tightened the chains around her arms. She winced but did not cry. Instead, her eyes followed him through the crowd, never breaking the connection. For the first time in many years, he felt something stir inside his chest. Anger, not for himself but for her. Anger that they chained her like an object. Anger that no one else cared. Anger that the galaxy allowed such cruelty to be entertainment. The human knew what he should do. Walk away, pretend he never saw her. It was safer, easier. But as he reached the edge of the crowd, he stopped. His hands tightened into fists. He could not forget her eyes, her whisper, and then something strange happened. The chains around her wrists glowed brighter, as if alive. The guard shouted in alarm, trying to control her. The announcer covered the microphone, shouting orders. For a moment, the girl's gaze flickered with light, not just reflection, but something deep within the human's heart pounded. He realized this girl was not ordinary. She was more than just a captive. She was dangerous to them, and maybe to him too. But instead of fear, he felt resolve. He leaned against the cold wall, pretending to watch the auction. But inside, he made a choice. He would not leave her behind, not after those words, not after those eyes. As the bidding grew higher and louder, he began to study the guards. Their armor, their weapons, their movements. His mind, sharp from years of survival, started to work on possibilities, risks, exits. The girl shifted slightly, her lips moving again. This time he read the words, even though no sound reached him. Please. That single word sealed his decision. The human trader who came for nothing, Special now had a mission that could change everything. He did not know her name. He did not know her world. But he knew one truth. He could not walk away. And so, in the heart of the alien market of chains, among warriors and raiders and greedy eyes, the human began to plan. Suspense filled the air, not from the auction, but from the silent bond between two strangers. She was chained, but her eyes spoke freedom. He was free, but her voice gave him purpose. And somewhere deep inside he whispered back, though no one heard, "I will." The human walked away from the crowd slowly, but his mind refused to calm. Every step carried the echo of her words. "Take me home." They were soft, almost broken, yet they carried more weight than the shouts of 100 bidders. He reached a darker corner of the station where the smell of smoke and rust mixed. Merchants pushed past him, carrying boxes of stolen goods. Slavers bragged about their catches. Bounty hunters laughed, comparing scars. But he heard none of it. His mind was trapped in those eyes, that voice. Why him? Why would she whisper to him? She could have cried out to anyone, begged to any face in the crowd. Yet her gaze had found only him. He felt as though invisible chains now wrapped around his own chest, tying him to her fate. He leaned against the cold wall, trying to think like a traitor again. He told himself the truth he knew. Interfering here was death. The market of chains was ruled by warlords. Their guards killed for sport. If he tried to touch that girl, he would not survive. And yet another truth whispered louder inside him. If he did nothing, then he was no better than the ones laughing at her suffering. He closed his eyes and remembered. Earth long behind him now, he remembered his mother's words when he was a boy. If you see someone in chains, you break them. Even if the chains are not on you, they are still wrong. The memory was sharp, burning. He could not run from it. When he opened his eyes, he noticed something strange. The guards were not calm. They kept glancing at her chains, whispering to one another. Their helmets reflected the faint glow of the shackles, but he saw unease in their movements. The announcer tried to smile, but sweat dripped down his forehead. He shouted higher numbers, waving his arms to keep the crowd excited. Yet beneath the show, fear moved in the shadows. The human realized the truth. She was not an ordinary captive. Her chains were not just for display. They were restraints, made to hold something dangerous. He looked back once more, and her gaze found him again. Her lips parted slightly, and though he could not hear, he could read them. "Do not leave me." His breath caught. The weight of her plea crushed the excuses inside him. He knew now. He could not walk away, but how? He had no weapons powerful enough, no army, no allies. He was one man in the middle of a hostile market surrounded by killers. Still, humans had survived worse. He had seen it in history. He had lived it in battles. Humanity never fought fair. They fought smart. Slowly he slipped into the back corridors of the station, away from the noise. The metal walls dripped with condensation, pipes hissed with steam, shadows stretched long and empty. He moved quietly, counting every turn, memorizing paths, watching patrols. He passed a pair of guards drinking near a broken door. They laughed about the auction, one saying, "That girl will not last long. The chains are eating her already." The other spat, replying, "Better she dies than escapes. Her kind always brings fire." The human froze, pressing against the wall, his mind sharpened. Their words confirmed what he already suspected. She was not just a girl. She was something feared, something powerful. But to him, none of that mattered. What mattered was her whisper, "Take me home." His jaw tightened. He began to form a plan. It was reckless, dangerous, almost impossible. But impossible was nothing new to humanity. He spent the next hour moving carefully, noting every guard post, every security panel, every vent that led toward the auction chamber. He watched how the chains were connected to a glowing console behind, her controlled by two officers with heavy rifles. The more he studied, the more his blood boiled. She was treated not as a person, but as a dangerous weapon locked away. And still, she sat silently, her head lowered, except when her eyes searched for him in the crowd. The auction rose higher, voices shouting numbers that sounded like entire fortunes. The announcer grinned again, but this time it was forced. He knew the bidders feared her almost as much as they wanted her. The human returned to the edge of the crowd, pretending to blend in, his face calm, his steps casual, but inside his mind burned like fire. Every detail of his plan came together piece by piece, a distraction first, chaos second. The guards would rush to control the crowd. That was when he would move. As the bidding grew louder, the girl lifted her head again. For the first time he saw her lips curve not into a smile but into defiance. Her eyes glowed faintly, like embers under ash, and then, as if the universe itself wanted to test him, she spoke again. Her voice, soft, but carried across the silence that fell for a moment. "Chains do not hold me forever," she whispered, not to the guards, not to the crowd, but only to him. The human's heart pounded. She was not begging anymore. She was warning, promising. Resisting in that instant, he knew the truth. She was not waiting to be saved. She was waiting for someone who believed. And so, the human who came as a traitor clenched his fists. His mission was no longer just survival. His mission was freedom. The crowd cheered as the bids rose higher, but they did not see what he saw. They saw a prize, a jewel, a trophy. But he saw a fire, one that no chain could hold forever, and in his mind he whispered back steady and clear, "I believe you." The human did not sleep that cycle. He sat in the corner of a rusted cargo bay, his back against a broken crate, staring at the ceiling pipes that leaked steam into the air. The noise of the auction still echoed in his ears, the sound of greedy voices shouting prices as if the chained girl were nothing but gold or jewels. But for him, she was no object. She was a voice, a pair of eyes. A promise whispered across the crowd. "Take me home." He pulled a small piece of scrap metal from his pocket, turning it slowly in his hand. It was nothing more than junk to anyone else, but to him, it became a puzzle piece, a tool, maybe even a key. He had survived too many wars by making weapons from nothing. Tonight he would do the same. The market of chains was dangerous, filled with guards who killed for entertainment. But the human knew how to watch, how to listen, how to turn danger into an advantage. He spent the hours studying the patrols, counting the steps of the guards, noting which doors opened with codes and which with old locks. By dawn's first artificial light, he had a map in his mind, not written on paper, but carved into memory. 3 guard posts between him and her cell, 2 cameras that rotated slowly, 1 console connected to her glowing shackles. The problem was not reaching her. The problem was breaking the chains that were not metal at all, but living restraints. Still, he refused to accept defeat. He walked through the market pretending to be nothing more than a trader again. He haggled over minor goods, rusty knives, cracked helmets, pieces of alien tech no one truly wanted. To the warlords he was harmless, a poor human scrounging for survival. And that disguise gave him time. While he argued over prices, his eyes searched for what he needed. Tools, wires, old energy cells, small explosives sold in secret. Everything was available here if you knew how to ask. Piece by piece he collected them, hiding them under his jacket. Hours passed. The auction for the girl continued, the numbers rising higher. Voices shouted, tempers flared. One warlord slammed his fist on the table, promising she would be his no matter the cost. The guards laughed, believing no one would dare interfere, but the human was already planning his interference. He found a quiet corner again, laying out the items he had collected: a cracked energy cell, a coil of wire, 2 smoke grenades, and the piece of scrap metal he had shaped with his knife. It was not much, but it would have to be enough. As he worked, his thoughts returned to her. He remembered the way her lips formed the word, "please," the way her eyes glowed faintly against the darkness. She was not afraid, not truly. She was enduring, waiting. He realized then that she had chosen him. Out of all the faces, all the species in that crowd, she had looked at him. And that choice gave him strength. He whispered under his breath as if speaking to her across the walls, "I will not fail you." When night fell again, he moved. The station corridors were quieter, though never silent. He stayed in the shadows, his steps careful, his heartbeat steady, his breathing controlled. Every survival skill he had ever learned now guided him. The first guard post came quickly. 2 aliens sat at a table playing a game with glowing dice. They laughed loudly, not even noticing the human slip behind a pipe. He pulled the coil of wire from his pocket, stretched it tight, and in a single motion, silenced them before they could cry out. He dragged their bodies into the shadows, covering them with a cloth. The second post was harder. A camera rotated back and forth, its red light cutting across the floor. He timed it carefully, waiting for the exact moment the light swung away. Then he sprinted low, his body pressed close. To the wall he moved faster than the camera could turn, disappearing into another hall. At the third post, his smoke grenades came into use. He tossed one down the corridor and thick gray mist filled the air. Guards coughed and shouted, firing blindly. The human moved through the cloud like a ghost, striking fast, knocking rifles from hands, leaving the guards unconscious before they even realized what had hit them. Finally, he reached the chamber. The girl sat on a raised platform, her chains connected to the glowing console. The announcer was gone. The crowd dismissed after the bidding ended. Only 2 officers remained, guarding her closely. Her eyes widened when she saw him step from the shadows. For the first time, hope lit her face, not in words but in a single breathless look. The officers turned, raising their rifles, but the human was faster. He hurled the cracked energy cell against the floor. Sparks exploded, lights flickered, alarms screamed. He used the chaos to rush forward, slamming one officer against the console. The other fired, the shot grazing his arm, but he pushed through the pain, grabbing the rifle and striking the guard down. The room filled with red light as the alarm spread through the station. The chains around her wrists glowed brighter, feeding on her energy. She winced, struggling against them. The human dropped to his knees beside her, pulling the scrap metal tool from his pocket. He pressed it against the lock on the chains. Sparks flew as he worked. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice steady. "I'll get you out." She stared at him, her lips trembling. "I knew you would come," she whispered back. And then, with a sharp crack, one shackle loosened. The girl gasped as her energy surged. Shaking the walls around them, the human looked at her, his eyes fierce. "We're not done yet," he said. Outside, footsteps thundered, voices shouted. The entire station was waking to their escape. But inside the chamber, for the first time, the girl was no longer just a prize. She was a person with fire in her blood. And he was the one who chose to risk everything for her freedom. And the escape had only begun. The alarms screamed across the station, red lights spinning on every wall. The sound of heavy boots thundered through the corridors. The human knew they had only moments before the guards stormed the chamber, yet his eyes stayed fixed on the glowing chains wrapped around the girl's wrists. One shackle had broken, but the others still burned with cruel light. Feeding on her strength, she trembled, her face pale but her eyes fierce. "The chains are alive," she whispered. "They drink my power. That is why they fear me free." The human pressed the scrap tool against the second lock. Sparks leapt, his hand shaking. The metal hissed as if fighting him, refusing to open. He cursed under his breath, sweat running down his temple. Behind him, the first wave of guards appeared at the door. Their rifles rose, but the girl's free hand lifted, weakly. For a heartbeat, her eyes blazed like fire. A wave of invisible force rippled outward, slamming the guards against the wall. Their weapons flew from their hands, clattering to the floor. The human stared in shock. His suspicion was true. She was no ordinary captive. Her bloodline carried something far greater. Her lips parted, her voice faint but steady. "That is why they keep me here. That is why they sell me. They think owning me will give them power." More guards rushed forward, shouting. The human grabbed one of their fallen rifles, firing in short bursts to keep them back. His movements were sharp, precise. He had fought too many battles to hesitate now. Between bursts of fire, he returned to the chains. He pressed the tool again, twisting hard. The lock sparked, burned, then cracked. The second shackle broke. The girl gasped, her strength returning in another surge of light that shook the chamber. But the glow spread to the console, alarms flashing brighter. A voice boomed through the speakers in 3 languages. "Contain the subject at once. Lethal force authorized. The girl's eyes widened with fear. If they kill me, the chains will collapse and destroy this place. The human did not flinch. Then we won't let them kill you, he said. His voice calm, steady, filled with a quiet fire. He moved to the third lock. But this one resisted more than the others. The living chain writhed like a serpent wrapping. Tighter around her arm, she winced in pain, her body trembling. He gritted his teeth. Stay with me, he whispered. He pulled wires from the console, forcing them against the lock. Electricity surged, shocking his arm, but he did not let go. Smoke filled the air. The chain screeched like a living thing, then finally snapped. Her body slumped forward, weak but freer than before. She looked at him with tearful eyes, whispering, You should not have come for me. You risk your life for nothing. He shook his head firmly. Not nothing. You asked me to take you home. That is enough. Her lips trembled, as if no one had ever spoken to her like that. The fourth shackle still held tight, glowing brighter now as if aware it was the last defense. Guards poured into the chamber, firing wildly. The human returned fire, pulling the girl behind the console for cover. Bullets sparked against metal walls, the air thick with smoke and fire. The girl pressed her hand against the floor, whispering words in a language he did not know. The ground shook, cracks forming beneath the boots of the guards. They stumbled, shouting in panic. Some fled, but others pressed forward. The human seized the moment, rushing to the final shackle. His tool broke under the heat snapping in his hands. His heart raced. He had nothing left. Then the girl placed her free hand on his, her eyes glowing. Do not fight it alone, she whispered. Her energy flowed through him. Hot. Alive. He gasped as light filled his vision. His hand burned with her strength as they pressed against the final lock together. The shackle screamed like metal tearing apart, then shattered in a burst of light that blinded the room. The chains dissolved into ash, falling around them like glowing dust. The guards fell back, shielding their faces from the blast. The girl stood slowly, no longer trembling. Her chains were gone, and her presence filled the room like a storm barely contained. The human looked at her in awe, his voice rough but steady. Who are you? She met his gaze, her eyes glowing like twin stars. I am the last daughter of a world they burned, the air they tried to erase, the fire they could not kill. She took a slow breath, her voice softening. But to you, I am just the one. Who asked for home? The human tightened his grip on the rifle, his jaw firm. Then let's get you home. But before they could move, the station shook violently. Heavy footsteps echoed down the halls. Not guards this time, but something larger. Machines designed for war. The girl's hand slipped into his, her grip warm. They will bring everything now, she said. They cannot let me go, not alive. He looked at her, then toward the door where the sound of metal giants drew closer, his heartbeat steady, his voice calm. Then we fight through everything. She nodded, her eyes fierce. Again, together. And so, in the heart of the market of chains, where once she had been displayed as a prize, she now stood free beside a human who refused to leave her behind. The storm of power was awake, and the galaxy would never forget it. The station shook again, the sound of metal giants echoing through the corridor. The human tightened his grip. On the rifle, his eyes sharp, he had faced soldiers, raiders, even beasts on forgotten worlds. But the sound coming toward them was heavier, mechanical, relentless. The girl, though free of the chains, looked down at her wrists, faint marks glowing where the shackles had burned into her skin. She whispered, softly, The shackles are gone, but the bind remains. He frowned, pulling her closer behind the console. What do you mean? She lifted her trembling hand, the glow in her eyes dimming for a moment. They forged the chains from living metal. It drinks from me, even now. Pieces of it are inside. I feel them moving under my skin. If I lose control, it will try to grow. Again, the human's chest tightened. His mind raced. This was worse than he had imagined. She was not only chained, she was infected, enslaved by something alive and cruel. Heavy doors burst open, and the first of the machines marched in, towering walkers of black steel, their legs pounding against the metal floor. Red lights blinked across their armor, weapons glowing with deadly energy. They were not guards anymore, they were executioners. The girl's breath quickened. They will not try to capture me now, they mean to erase me. The human placed a steady hand on her shoulder, his voice low and calm. Then they'll have to erase me too. Her eyes flickered with surprise, but also something softer. Trust. The first walker opened fire. Energy blasts tore across the chamber. The human shoved her down and rolled behind the console. Sparks flew as metal melted under the blasts. He returned fire, sharp and precise. Aiming for weak joints, his shots slowed one walker, making it stumble, but it was not enough. The girl pressed her hands against the floor again, whispering words that shook the air. Light flared around her, slamming into the nearest machine. The walker staggered, circuits screaming, but the effort drained her. She fell back into his, arms gasping. The human pulled her close, shielding her from debris. He whispered quickly, "You're burning yourself out. Save your strength." "I'll handle them." Her voice was weak but firm. "Without me, you will die. Without you, I will fall. We must fight together." He met her gaze, and for the first time, he felt the truth of her words. This was no longer about one saving the other, it was survival bound together. The walkers advanced again, their weapons hummed, charging for a heavier blast. The human's mind raced. He spotted the glowing console behind them, wires sparking where he had broken the chains. An idea struck him, risky and wild, but humanity had always thrived on impossible risks. He dragged her toward the console, bullets hissing past them. He ripped wires free, sparks biting into his skin. He jammed the energy cell he had stolen earlier into the core. The console screamed, lights flashing violently. The girl's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" He grit his teeth. "Turning their own chains against them." The console exploded in a surge of power. A wave of white-blue energy burst across the chamber. The living metal fragments hidden in her wrists flared like fire. She screamed, falling to her knees, but the energy pulse also struck the walkers. Their systems overloaded, metal cracking. Red lights went dark one by one. The human dropped beside her, holding her shoulders as she trembled. Her voice shook. "It hurts. The shards are alive inside me. They're trying to grow again." He looked down at her wrists, faint black lines crawling under her skin like veins of shadow. His jaw tightened. "Then we cut them out. We don't let them win." Her eyes filled with fear. "If you fail, I may die." He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "If we do nothing, they'll kill you anyway. I'd rather fight than watch you fade." For a long moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the crackle of burning machines. Then she nodded slowly, her eyes glowing faintly again. "Do it." The human pulled the broken scrap tool from his pocket, reshaped into a crude blade. He pressed her hand gently, whispering, "Hold on to me." She gripped his arm tightly as he pressed the blade against her wrist, cutting into the glowing marks. Black smoke hissed as the living metal shrieked, twisting like worms under her skin. She cried out in pain but did not let go. Her grip stayed firm, her eyes locked on his. He dug deeper, pulling the first shard free. It writhed in his hand like a living insect. He hurled it against the floor, smashing it under his boot. Sparks and black ash scattered, her breathing steadied. But more lines crawled up her arm. He worked quickly, sweat dripping from his forehead, pulling shard after shard. Each one fought him, biting into his skin, but he refused to stop. He was not just fighting for her life. He was fighting against the chains themselves. Finally, with a last wrench, he tore the final piece free. The girl collapsed against him, gasping. Her body shook, but the black lines faded. The glow in her eyes steadied, clear and strong again. She whispered weakly, You freed me twice." He brushed the sweat from his brow, his voice calm but fierce. "No, you freed yourself. I just helped." Before they could rest, the station trembled again. Louder footsteps echoed down the halls, warlords shouting orders, soldiers gathering. The explosion had turned the entire market into chaos. The girl leaned against him, still weak but alive. Her eyes burned with new resolve. "They will not stop. Not until we are ashes." He lifted her gently, his grip firm. Then let's make sure they choke on the fire. And so, in the heart of the alien station, with the living shackles broken, and the machines destroyed, a human and a girl once chained prepared to face the storm that was now coming for them. Together, bound not by chains but by choice, the escape was no longer just survival. It was war. The freighter shuddered as it tore through the void, engines groaning under the strain. Warning lights blinked across the cockpit, alarms screaming. But the human's hands stayed firm on the controls, eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Behind them, the storm of pursuit had begun. Alien warships spread across the darkness like predators, their engines glowing red. Their voices filled the comms in harsh alien tongues, demanding surrender, promising death. The girl sat beside him, still weak, but glowing faintly, her wrists free of chains but scarred with the memory of them. She looked at the stars rushing past and whispered, "They will not stop until we are nothing. They will burn every world you touch just to reach me." He glanced at her, his jaw hard. "Then we won't let them touch us. Not today, not ever." The first warship opened fire, beams of energy slicing past the freighter, shaking it violently. The human swerved hard, pulling the ship into a roll. The girl gripped the seat, her voice trembling. "This ship cannot outrun them." He allowed a faint smile even as sweat dripped down his brow. "Ships don't win races. Pilots do." She stared at him, caught between fear and awe. The freighter dove through a cluster of asteroids, chunks of rock spinning past them. Enemy fire followed, smashing stone into burning dust. The human twisted the controls, weaving between the rocks. The freighter scraped and groaned, but it held. The warships struggled to follow, larger and heavier, but more came, slipping around the asteroids, surrounding them in a net of burning light. The girl closed her eyes, pressing her hands. Together, her voice whispered in her strange tongue, and the air inside the cockpit grew warm. The lights flickered, energy humming through the ship. The engines flared brighter than before, as if her will alone fed them. The freighter surged forward with new speed, blasting past the nearest ships. For the first time, a gap opened between them and the hunters. The human looked at her in wonder. "What did you do?" She opened her eyes, glowing faintly. "I gave it a piece of myself, but I cannot give much more." He shook his head. "Save your strength. We'll find another way." The comms buzzed, and a warlord's voice roared through, filled with fury. "Human, return the prize and your death will be quick. Resist and we will burn every world you love." The human's lips curled into a grim smile. His voice cut back sharp and steady. "She's not a prize, she's free, and if you want her, you'll have to tear me from the stars first." For a moment, silence followed. Then the warlords' laughter echoed like thunder. "Then die with her." The warships moved again, forming a wall of steel and fire. The freighter shook as blasts ripped across its hull. Panels sparked, alarms screamed louder. The human gritted his teeth, forcing the ship into a steep dive. The girl gripped his arm, her eyes wide. "We cannot break through them, they are too many." His gaze stayed on the stars, calm, certain. "Maybe, but humans don't always need strength. Sometimes we just need one chance." He pulled the freighter low, diving toward the edge of a nearby planet's gravity well. The ship rattled, fighting against the pull. Warships followed, some firing, others circling to cut them off. He flipped a switch, releasing the last of the stolen explosives into the trail behind them. The warlords laughed, thinking them useless against such power. Then the human dove deeper into the planet's pull, dragging the freighter dangerously close. The explosives ignited in the gravity well, the force twisting the blast into a storm of fire and rock. It ripped through the nearest warships, tearing their hulls apart. The girl gasped, staring at the burning wreckage in awe. You turned their own trap into a weapon." He allowed a faint grin. "Humans are good at that." But more ships remained, rising from the flames. The freighter shook violently, warning lights flashing red. The engines sputtered, nearly out of power. The girl's eyes softened as she turned to him. "If I give the ship everything, it may take us through, but it will cost me." My life may burn away with it. His chest tightened. He grabbed her hand firmly, shaking his head. No, I didn't fight this far to lose you now. Tears glimmered in her eyes. If I stay, you die. If I burn, you live. He pulled her closer, his voice fierce. Listen to me. Home is not a sacrifice, it's not chains, it's not fire. Home is a choice, and I will not let you choose death. She trembled, staring into his eyes. And for a moment the storm outside faded. Only his voice, steady and strong, remained. Slowly she nodded, her tears falling. Then take me home, she whispered again. But this time, not as a plea, but as a promise. With her hand in his, they turned the freighter upward, away from the burning trap. The engines screamed, metal groaned, but the ship pushed forward, slipping through the last gap between the enemy warships. Blasts tore past them, close enough to shake the hull, but they broke through, bursting into open space. Stars stretched wide ahead, endless and free. Behind them, the warlords roared in fury, their ships broken, their chase shattered. The storm of pursuit had failed. The girl leaned against him, exhausted, but alive, her glow steady, her voice soft. You gave me freedom, you gave me more than chains could ever steal, now I know. My home is with you. The human looked at her, his expression steady but warm. Then we'll build it, out there among the stars, a home no chain can touch. And as the freighter disappeared into the deep black of space, leaving the ruins of the market of chains behind, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, because one human, with nothing but resolve and defiance, had stolen the prize that could ignite empires. Not for power, not for riches, but for freedom, for choice, for home. And somewhere in that silence, the universe whispered back the truth that every species would soon learn. Humanity does not walk away. Humanity takes you home.